Let's get some analysis now of the election result. I'll be joined by Peter McGorran, the former Howard Government Minister, shortly. First, though, let's go to long-term Labor advisor and now with Hawker Britton, Simon Banks. Simon, great to see you.
Pleasure.
A big result for Anthony Albanese at the weekend and a progressive swing, which saw that teal tidal wave.
Yeah, correct. I mean, across the board, I mean, effectively, if you want to kind of look at this election in terms of three bands of seats, obviously in those sort of inner metropolitan seats, leafier suburbs of our, particularly our major cities, swings to both the Teals and the Greens, obviously particularly in Brisbane where there weren't any Teal candidates up there. In the middle rung, very strong results for Labor pretty much across the board, right through Sydney and particularly Melbourne, and of course over in Western Australia where the Labor Party's done incredibly well. And then when you got to those sort of outer metropolitan seats, those sort of fringe urban seats, if you like, the simple answer is that the coalition didn't get the swings that it needed in reverse. So that produced the big result for the Teals, a decent result for the Greens up in Queensland, strong result for Labor through the middle part of all of our cities.
Is it fair to say that with Labor's primary down, that in some of those inner city leafy electorates that traditional Labor voters voted for the Teals?
Yeah, there was a lot of strategic voting going on. I mean, you saw it here with David Pocock. He just interviewed here in the Senate for the ACT. There were a lot of people who normally would put Labor number one in the Senate here in the ACT who preferenced, gave David their first vote as well. And I think that is true, and particularly in a lot of those suburbs. So it'll be interesting to see, exactly what that sort of effect is. The election review will have a look at that pretty closely. I actually think what you'll find out is that once you take those sorts of factors into account, the Labor primary will be back in positive territory, but not greatly, but probably just inside positive territory.
And when you look at the Greens surge in southeast Queensland, Anthony Chisholm spoke to us yesterday afternoon on our election wash-up coverage. He said basically that took Labor by surprise in the final week.
Yeah, I think it caught them a little bit by surprise, the strength of that. But I think in part that was kind of that surge of that Teal vote. They went to go to the ballot box in those seats like Ryan, Griffith, Brisbane, couldn't find a Teal candidate sitting there on the ballot paper, and so they went to the Greens.
So the Teals could have won 3 or 4 more,
potentially? I think if they'd considered running up in, particularly a seat like Ryan, they would have been in a red-hot chance.
Anthony Albanese straight to the Quad today. I asked him about the China question. He's showing no sign of wavering in terms of Australia standing up for its values, so that continuity continues. He did say he wouldn't politicise national security, though, so that was a key point that he clearly wanted to articulate before departing for Japan. What's the key challenge for him now in these first weeks?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about our foreign policy challenge, I think what you're going to see, Penny Wong talked about it a lot before the election, which is to, speak a little more quietly, but equally as determinedly about what you do, and to build that relationship of friends. So particularly in Southeast Asia, I think you'll see Australian foreign policy being far more active to look at ways that we can work with our neighbours to sort of build a broader coalition in the region. And I think if you've already seen from some of the comments coming from Pacific Island leaders, they very much welcome the election of the government, particularly because of what it's going to do on climate change.
What was your read on Anthony Albanese's opening victory speech, the need to bring people together, and did he hit the mark with that?
Yeah, look, I've thought this for some time. I think there were some opportunities over the last few years where even the other side of politics could have done this. I think Australians are sick of the hyper-partisanship. I think they actually want to come together and have a bit of a conversation. I think they would accept that maybe that means that you don't get as big a decisions out of government, but they want them to be more collective, to have come about because we're actually talking with one another, not at one another. So I think there's a real opportunity here for Anthony Albanese to help bring that nation a little bit closer together. Of course, there are going to continue to be big political differences in this country, but I think people are a bit sick of that kind of hyper-partisanship that we've seen over recent years.
One of the things that we heard from Labor during the campaign was how well received the log cabin story or the Housing Commission story was received by people.
Yep.
And focus groups apparently said it repeatedly. And then today, Anthony Albanese sworn in at Government House as the 31st Prime Minister. It is quite the story, isn't it?
No, like it is an incredible story, but also isn't it a fantastic reminder? And I think this is what a lot of Australians were attracted to in relation to Anthony, is that sense that he is the every person. That, you look in your family or your community and you see people like him who you think should be part of the national conversation because they're good, decent people with good, decent ideas. And that's part of that coming together that we just talked about. I think there's a lot more people that actually want to be involved in politics, but they found the process of politics has been pushing them away.
Do you think Labor will get to the 76 seats, the majority? And if they don't, I guess we did see a reminder this morning from the new Prime Minister how when it comes to Parliament, there is no one better in terms of knowing how it works.
Yep.
He was the leader of the government during a hung Parliament, the leader of the House of Reps.
Correct.
And he's already locked in a couple of the crossbench to ensure supply and confidence, regardless of whether they get to 76 or not. So he's got that base covered.
Well, the key thing to know is that, let's say they get to 76 or 77, which I think they will do. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen over the next 3 years in terms of this Parliament. Like we've seen in the past that, occasionally people go rogue or they do something that they shouldn't have done and they get kicked out of their respective party and all of that sort of stuff. So you do need to have that protective device in place so that providing you're, dealing genuinely with people. But Kieran, Anthony's not interested just in governing for the next 3 years. This idea of governing together means that you start doing that in the Parliament itself. You try and find those wider set of issues of agreement that you can find across the Parliament where we can make progress. And I think you saw the first steps of that move by him reaching out to people as diverse as, from Bob Katter right through to Rebecca Sharkey. He's reaching out right across the political aisle to try and find that greater consensus around the middle of Australian politics.
When you talk about the challenge facing the other side of politics now with the Teals and wiping out several moderate Liberals, including the next potential leader or Prime Minister, Josh Frydenberg, it took a bad result and made it a disaster really for the Liberals. And things, when you're facing it as a political party like the Liberals are now, it seems like it's sort of, how do they overcome it?
Yep.
And it seems like a long journey. But with Peter Dutton, they've got a very effective political operator as opposition leader. You wouldn't want to underestimate him.
No. Well, put it simply, Kieran, Bob Menzies made the Liberal Party and Scott Morrison just destroyed it. How do they pull it back together? Look, I agree with you about Peter Dutton. I know that he's not the most popular person in some parts of the community out there, though he's very popular, I must say, in Queensland. He is a very effective cut-through politician. People know what he stands for. The question for him, though, is that he's got to reknit that old Bob Menzies Liberal Party across the diversity of what the Liberal Party represents, and that's going to be a significant challenge.
Maybe he's the person to do it. But I wouldn't underestimate him. I remember people underestimating Tony Abbott within the Labor Party, and we all know how that ended.
And the other side underestimated Anthony Albanese, didn't they?
That's true.
So never underestimate your opponent.
No, definitely not. And I think Albanese knows not to underestimate Peter Dutton. They know each other pretty well.